18 months after his wife died, he married her caregiver, and that caregiver is now being accused of not only abusing him, but robbing him of millions of dollars. This story is the true definition of never knowing what goes on behind closed doors. This is 91-year-old Forrest Preston, and he's the founder of Life Care Centers, which is a nursing home chain founded in 1970. To this day, he is the sole owner of the company, which has over 200 nursing facilities and assisted living communities in 28 states. So in 2018, suddenly and seemingly out of nowhere, Forrest married 49-year-old Kim Phuong Nguyen. This happened just 18 months after his wife died, and what's crazy is the fact that Kim was his late wife's caregiver. They got married without any of Forrest's family knowing, so this was understandably a huge shock to his 4 kids. Ever since then, Kim and his family haven't really gotten along, but according to a recent court filing, Kim is now being accused of abusing Forrest, both physically and financially, and the findings and claims from this investigation are bizarre. Court documents state that Forrest has suffered from different stages of dementia since 2010, and he's currently disabled and unable to care for himself. Since the pandemic, Kim has reportedly isolated Forrest from his family and company officials. Meanwhile, and this is all alleged, she has funneled millions of his dollars worth of real estate and cash to herself and her family. Anytime Forrest has business calls, she will screen them, and not only that, she will attend all of his board meetings. It's being said that she makes all of his decisions for him and sometimes won't let him speak to important figures like lenders for months at a time, even in time-sensitive situations. Kim has also reportedly accused his employees of having affairs and would accept bribes, and she even threatened to kill a high-level life care executive who argued with her one time. She eventually got that executive fired. According to the legal filing, Kim once flashed a gun that she was wearing on her waistband to Forrest's family, saying that she would use it to protect him. Forrest's son has now filed for a conservatorship for his dad because he feels like he's not able to make the sound decisions needed to keep Life Care Centers running. He feels that it's already bad enough that Kim has stolen so much money from Forrest, but now it seems like that isn't enough. Now it seems like she wants total control over the nursing home chain, and the decisions that she's been making are quite literally putting the company in jeopardy. It's gotten so bad that lenders are now refusing to move forward with the company until it can essentially get everything under control. Now the company is behind $100 million in deferred maintenance and equipment that hasn't properly been taken care of. It's had to recently close down or sell several facilities just to keep its head above water. What's really concerning is the fact that the last time Forrest was really seen in public was 2 years ago, and Kim was right by his side. His son began to worry about him and the company when, out of nowhere, Forrest suddenly said that he wanted to make his new wife the CEO of the company, even though she is really not qualified for that position. That, and when company executives and board members started contacting him, asking him what was really going on, and pretty much informing him that the whole company will likely fail if it continues down this path. Because of the recent legal accusations, a judge has ordered Forrest to undergo medical exams to determine whether or not he is mentally able to continue in his position with the company. He is going to be interviewed away from Kim and her family by a court-appointed attorney who will act as his guardian. Kim will also be interviewed as well. This entire case was filed under the Tennessee Adult Protection Act. This is just really sad to me because he quite literally dedicated his life to caring for the elderly and making sure they have a safe community. And now at 91, he's being taken advantage of. This isn't just a one-off situation either. People think that once you turn a certain age that you can pretty much just do whatever you want to them. And it's scary how often this happens.
Spooky story time. A follower named Ryan sent me the story and we're gonna call it The Clouds. Ryan says that he and his family have always dealt with and seen spirits, but this specific day is something that he will never forget. Ryan says that this happened when he was about 8 years old and he, his dad, and his sister were getting ready to leave the house to go to his baseball game. He gets in the car, he's getting himself situated, and he's just there and he's like, why is my dad and my sister taking forever? So he kind of looks at them like, all right guys, let's go. And his dad and his sister are looking up at the sky and they have this like weird look on their face. As always, he doesn't think anything crazy, and then he feels this like big gust of wind just like shoom hit the car and everything, and he's like, what was that? Then he sees his dad and his sister looking somewhere down the street, and again they have this like shocking look to their face. So they get in their car and Brian is like, what's going on? Like, and they were both freaking out. They say that in the sky, this cloud started to form, and it was starting to form, it looked kind of like a door. The door opened up and this bright light came through it. They said that a cloud came through the door as well, and it was kind of spinning, something similar to a tornado. and it started forming into some cloud man. They were like, "Did you feel that wind?" And Ryan was like, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, it was windy because this cloud thing kind of was dropping down and it landed on the street, and that's when the wind came." And it kind of dissolves in front of one of their neighbor's house, who's an older lady. Ryan says that what's crazy is that 4 days later, she ends up passing. And he says that what's even crazier is that 4 days before, her husband passed. Ryan's dad is very religious, and he says that he ended up going to a priest and asking for advice, what do you think this was? And he says that the priest said all he could think of was maybe somehow this was that older woman's husband, and maybe he was coming down for her. And he says that he swears 100% this happened and no one's changing his mind. Have any of you guys ever experienced anything like this before? And if you haven't, what do you guys think? Thank you so much to Ryan for sending me this spooky story. If you guys have any other stories that you'd like for me to read, please send them via DM or email, and I'd love to read them, and I will see you guys in the next spooky story. Bye!
Let's talk about the Hat Man. If you're new here, hi. I used to talk about some pretty scary stuff, and recently I opened an email where everyone could submit their ghost stories, and let me tell you, y'all have some really terrifying experiences, and I've loved reading through every single one of them. This story in particular comes from a person who would like to remain anonymous, and I'm obviously going to respect that. So let's get into it. The story starts off by this person telling me that her mom, and her little brother moved into a house when she was probably 11 or 13-ish. And she immediately started having things happen to her. There are two examples in this entire email that I would like to highlight. The first one is about her getting up for school. She notes that she's always the first one up, and there was no way that someone else could have done this. She was making her breakfast before she had to go to school, and she dropped a spoon in the kitchen. Followed by her dropping the spoon in the kitchen, she hears a voice say, "Good job." She turns around, no one's there, and her mother is sleeping in the basement of this house, so there's no way it could have been her. And her little brother obviously doesn't sound like a full-grown woman. But she brushes it off and just kind of lets time go by. The second example is a lot worse than the first one. This girl tells me that her and her brother used to share the master bedroom when her mom was working until they kind of fell asleep and her mom would sleep on the couch. They were watching a movie in their mom's room. She fell asleep with her back faced to the door. Light in the hallway is on, when all of a sudden she feels someone grab around her waist and shake her awake. She immediately turns around to go and see if she can see anyone, and she didn't see anything. She walks downstairs, and her mom is home, but looking out of the window. She asks her mom, "What are you doing up right now? What's going on?" And her mom says, "Nothing. I just thought I heard something," etc. They say goodnight, and they don't talk about it again. And I wouldn't say that this particular detail is a specific experience. This would just happen a lot. She would always see a man with a top hat and a coat standing in the doorway in the dark. And she would just stare at him until she fell asleep, which was soon discovered to be the Hat Man. And if you don't know who the Hat Man is, just look him up. I don't want to explain him because he freaks me out and I sleep with a lamp on. So anyways, it turns out that her mom had actually been experiencing things but didn't want to scare her kids, so she never said anything until after they moved out. This person also mentions that before her mom and her brother moved in, her grandma owned the house and said that there was a really bad heaviness. And after they moved out, her uncle owned it. And they disclosed that a pretty serious thing happened in the house where it would feel very heavy. If anything ever grabbed me, I think we'd have to cut the cameras because that would send me over the edge. Anyways, that's gonna do it for me. Stay tuned for more ghost stories.
Have you ever heard a scary noise inside of your walls that you just presume is the radiators or the pipes? Well, do not watch this video if you're home alone, because this case just proves that it could in fact be a murderer living in your walls. It was a cold December night in 1986. Teenager Tina Bowen was living in Massachusetts, and she'd actually been going through a really difficult time. Her mum had recently passed away, and she was struggling to sleep. She was struggling with her mood, obviously. And as time went on, she started to kind of hear strange noises from the walls of her house, which she presumed maybe they were in her head, or maybe actually they were her mum trying to come forward from the afterlife and communicate with her in some way, which was kind of comforting in a weird way. The reality of the situation, though, was so much more horrifying than anyone could have expected. As time went on, the noises started growing more and more loud and more creepy. Gradually, terrifying things started to happen inside of the home. Things like items being rearranged or moved, almost like there was a poltergeist in there, and also milk going missing from the fridge, and the TV changing channel without anybody touching the remote. It was getting so freaky, Tina just knew this could not be her imagination. Then, in the most terrifying discovery of all, writing on the walls started to appear. Messages like, "Marry me and I'm in your bedroom, come and find me." Legit like a real life horror film. Then on the night in question, Tina and her dad came home to a sight that is literally something out of your nightmares. A figure was stood in the wardrobe in the home with a painted face, holding a hatchet. Initially, Tina and her dad were both frozen with fear, but then the figure forced them into the bedroom. Now, luckily at this point, Tina was able to move into a different room and really quickly called the police. When officers raced to the house, they found teenager Daniel LaPlante was the culprit. And this was absolutely mind-blowing to Tina because she knew him. He was a couple of years older than Tina and had previously asked her out, and although she did find him a bit scruffy, he wasn't exactly attractive, she did go out with him, but then she just refused to see him again. So Daniel basically then decided upon this rejection to break into her home and live in the walls of her house for weeks. Men versus rejection. And when people say to women, like, why don't you just say no? Why don't you just decline? But if you think this story was horrific enough, you have no idea. While he was out on bail for literally living inside the walls of a helpless young woman, in December 1987, he decided to break into the house of another woman. This was the house of pregnant nursery teacher Priscilla Gustafson. He lived a really simple life with her two adorable children, aged 7 and 5. She was an amazing mum and a really hard worker. She really worked hard to make sure her children had a nice life. After breaking into the home where she was with her two defenseless children, Daniel brutally arred her. He then callously shot her multiple times, killing her. He then drowned both of her children in the bathtub of the home. When Priscilla's body was found, she was face down on her bed. Daniel was given 3 life sentences, but why was he even allowed bail in the first place? I'm sorry, but there's something severely messed up about somebody who breaks into somebody's house because they rejected and just lives in the walls for weeks.
Someone just DM'd me the creepiest story of when they rented a house which backed onto Epping Forest. Mum of the family worked in beauty, and she used to do her beauty clients of a night time when her husband would come home. She had like a log cabin outbuilding that she used to do nails and whatnot from. This one particular night, her husband comes home and he's got like flu-like symptoms. So she says to him, I'll cancel my first client, you go and put yourself to bed, I'll put the kids down, and then when they're asleep, I'll go out to the log cabin and I'll take the baby monitor down with me. So she puts the kids to bed. They are fast asleep, and she heads out to do her first client, and she moves her chair so that she's got a view of their house. About 15 minutes after she starts her client, she notices that her son's bedroom light goes on. He's obviously going to wake my husband up, so she says to her client, do you mind if I quickly pop in and just check everything's okay? Because on the baby monitor, she keeps hearing static noises, and she's like, I don't know if that's crying. She goes back into the house, and she's standing at the bottom of the stairs, and she shouts up to her little boy. He says, no, mummy, I'm scared. I'm scared, mummy, come and get me. And she says, no, I'm not coming up to get you. Get back into your bed. And she listens for him to get back in bed, and she hears him get back in bed. And then she goes back out and he turns the light off. Gets back outside and she starts doing her client's nails again. And within like 5 minutes, she starts to hear something on the baby monitor. This time they can properly hear it. It's like a child giggling. Like her son is up and he is playing with toys, it sounds like. Looks up and the light's gone back on. And she's like, this kid is in serious trouble now. Like, he's playing up, obviously, because his dad's poorly. She shouts up the stairs and she says, you best get back in bed, kid. Like, I am not playing anymore. This is no joke. And then she hears, and the kid gets back in bed. She goes back out and she starts doing her next few clients. She does see that light go back on in her child's room, but at this point she's like, I just need to finish my client. He's going to be tired for school, and that's that. And then she sees her kitchen light go on, so she's thinking, oh great, my husband's awake, but you know what, at least he's got supervision. By the time she finishes work that evening, both of the lights are now off. So she's thinking everybody's asleep. She comes in through her back door, and on the floor in her kitchen, it's soaked. And in her mind, she thinks that her son's come down, got himself a drink, and he's obviously spilt it on the floor and he's gone back up and not cleaned it. So she cleans it up and she goes to bed. She ends up staying in her other child's room because when she gets to her bedroom, both the kids are asleep with their dad in her bed and there's no room. In the morning, when her son wakes up, she says to him, you know, that was really naughty what you did last night. I heard you playing with your toys. I heard you giggling on the baby monitor. And her husband chimes in and is like, no, he didn't. Pretty much as soon as you went out to work, he said he was scared and I went and got him and put him in bed with me. So she says, what about the time I came in and told you to turn the light off? The husband says, I pulled his blind down. Before I left that room, there's no way you saw his light go on and off. They go upstairs to his room and the blinds are open and they didn't open them. What about when I heard running and I heard somebody hop into the bed, like I heard the springs, I heard the bare feet on the floor? No, definitely not. Both of the kids were in bed with me by 7 o'clock. What about the water in the kitchen? Somebody came down to get a drink. The light was on in the kitchen. The husband's like, I certainly did not go downstairs for a drink last night. When they asked their son what he was scared of that night, he said it was the little girl that kept open his blinds and saying, let's play, it's light out. They stay in that house for another 6 months and then they find somewhere else to live. Because the entire time that they live there, strange things happen. Random adults walk through their garden when their kids were playing in the garden. Walk out of the tree line, straight into their garden. They would have people knocking on their French windows of a night time saying that they were lost and they needed a phone. But the worst part of everything they experienced was that whatever was in their house would mimic their children's voices. I personally think they did well to stay for 6 months. Nope.
Did you guys know there was an Astroworld tragedy before the Astroworld tragedy? The P. Diddy crowd crush is absolutely sickening. It was the 28th of December 1991 in New York City. P. Diddy, who back then was called Puff Daddy, was involved in organising basically like a charity basketball game with a load of hip-hop stars set to perform. This was a big deal. There were really popular stars at the time such as Heavy D and Run DMC. So basically this event was massively promoted and went pretty viral back in the days before there was even social media. It was really heavily promoted, A, because it was a charity basketball game, and B, there was going to be obviously the massive celebrities there, and obviously they were promoting this on things like radio stations. Tickets were just $12 in advance, and there was also the option to pay $20 on the door, which is still massively cheap. So obviously people without tickets did show up hoping that they would be able to get in. But the issue was that the venue that they had actually organised this at was pretty small in the grand scheme of things. It was tiny in comparison to the amount of people that were interested. I think the venue was only able to hold about 2,700 people. It was the City College campus, which goes without saying is just not equipped for a massive crowd. But the hype was growing and more people were planning on just showing up and hoping they could get a ticket on the door. This was very similar to Astroworld in that people without tickets did show up, unfortunately. And P. Diddy was in charge of handling ticket sales and promotion and coordinating the security for the event. So this is obviously massively relevant here. Just after 5 p.m. on the evening in question, the crowd started to gather outside the venue. People were desperate to get in. At approximately 5:30 p.m, the doors closed with hundreds of people still outside, and they were pretty angry that they weren't going to be allowed in. By now, there were nearly 5,000 people at the venue trying to make their way inside, and this was causing a very dangerous situation. Just before 7 p.m, people who had not been let in, obviously only a small handful of people, decided to break a glass door to try and get inside, and then this whole crowd just surged forward. There was essentially like a small alcove slash stairwell in the venue where you could enter before getting into the actual gym that they wanted to get into. But the issue for that crowd was that they weren't going to be able to force their way into the gym because of the way that the doors opened. They didn't open into the gym, they opened into the crowd. Basically, as more and more people were being jammed into the stairwell, it was causing this massive crush. The crush got worse and worse, and people were getting more crushed the more people tried to go forward. And the people at the kind of back of the crowd didn't really understand what was going on and why they weren't getting any closer to the event. This was despite the presence of 66 police officers at the event and over 50 total security staff. Between 7 and 7:15 p.m, innocent victims in that stairwell were being crushed and suffocated. Horrifically, 8 people were pronounced dead at the scene, and many more were taken to hospital. 1 other person was pronounced dead when they got to the hospital. An announcement apparently at the event at the time over the tannoy stated that due to deaths, the event was now cancelled, and basically suddenly everybody just fled the area. And although obviously a very small minority of the crowd were responsible for the breaking of the glass and rushing the venue, families of the victims did file lawsuits against the organisers of the event, including P. Diddy. Although if you've watched any interviews of P. Diddy talking about this event, honestly you'd think he was the victim. He never actually mentions any of the people who tragically lost their lives. Just reminded me so much of Travis Scott talking about Astroworld. Lawsuits were later settled for reportedly millions of dollars.
Let's talk about something scary. If you're new here, hi. I usually talk about some pretty scary stuff on here, and today I'm going to be talking about an experience that my best friend in high school had, and I'm going to be honest, I don't know how I forgot it. It's absolutely bone-chilling, and it really makes you think about how many places are actually haunted. So let's get into it. I had a friend in high school, we'll call him Jay, who was an active and avid ghost hunter. He believes in the paranormal, the afterlife, spirits, demons, stuff like that. And we really started being friends while I was going through the aftermath of playing with a Ouija board. So just for some context, 2 hours outside of my hometown, there is a road in the middle of nowhere called Seven Sisters Road. And it is allegedly very haunted. Legend has it that 7 women in the early 1900s were murdered on that road and their spirits never left. And as a result, people experience paranormal activity. People say that they see balls of light, apparitions, they have their radio go out, their car dies, they hear laughing and whispering and screaming. And just as a reminder, this is in the middle of nowhere, and it is a gravel road with a forest, train tracks, and that's about it. And I guess my friend Jay got really curious one night and drove out there. And it is safe to say that I woke up from him blowing my phone up. And what I saw on my phone was absolutely horrifying. It was a vlog style video with one hand on the wheel, one hand on his phone, filming, talking to the camera about how he's about to park on Seven Sisters Road and how he's kind of skeptical because it's just a legend. He parks and immediately his radio goes out. And when that happens, you can visibly see that he was afraid. And he's like, there's no way. So he starts messing with the buttons because he's parked at this point. Radio comes back on and he's like, okay, it was just a fluke. As he says that, car dies. And I don't mean his car shuts off and his headlights are still on. I'm talking like car died, headlights are off. So now he's sitting in complete darkness in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night. And it gets worse because he starts to hear gravel moving. And at this point, you can see the pure fear in his face. And he says that he can start to feel the car moving. Not forwards and backwards, but kind of rocking side to side. He sits there for a second. After it's done, he tries to start the car. Car starts. He turns the headlights on. He gets out and he starts looking at the car. At which point, you can see more fear in his face when he realizes that there are footprints on his car. And at this point, he turns his camera around and he's filming the footprints, and he takes his finger and swipes it across the footprint to show that these are fresh. And if anyone doesn't know why he did that, when you drive on a gravel road, you have a layer of dust on your car. I've talked about this particular thing before. You have a layer of dust that sits on your car, and when you touch it, it leaves a mark. And by him taking his finger and going across the footprint, leaving the same mark on the hood of the car as the footprint did, showed that those footprints were fresh. Then he said something along the lines of like, absolutely not. Gets in his car, reverses, and gets the heck out of there. When he gets home, he realizes that the footprints weren't just on the hood of the car. They went all the way up his windshield, on top of his sunroof, and towards the back of the car, but they just stopped before they got to the trunk. I also forgot to mention that he did this on a school night. So when he got to school the next day, he showed me his car with the footprints on it. And with the sun hitting it, you could see clear as day footprints walking up his windshield. And in all honesty, that is a huge factor on why I have not visited that place. I'm too scared. But that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for more ghost stories.
This is the terrifying story of how two teenagers went on a hike, vanished, and how social media helped catch their. This case is known as the Snapchat. Trigger warning that this case does involve the unaliving of 2 minors, so if that is triggering to you in any way, shape, or form, please skip this video. It's not worth it. I will see you in my next one. And also a disclaimer that I am just a girl, not a lawyer. I get all my information from the internet and articles, so if any of it is incorrect, please just correct me in the comments. Don't get mad at me. On February 13th, 2017, 13-year-old Abigail Williams and 14-year-old Liberty, known as Libby German, decided to spend a quiet, snowy afternoon going on a hike in Delphi, Indiana. Around 2:07 p.m., Libby snaps the last photo ever taken of Abby, walking along an abandoned railroad bridge, just moments before they both vanished. Roughly 3 hours later at 5:30 p.m., Libby's father hadn't heard anything from her, and both of the girls' families became worried. I mean, for a 14-year-old not to be on her phone for 3 hours is definitely alarming. So the families called the police and a search was launched. It wasn't until the next morning that 2 hikers found their unalived bodies near Deer Creek, which was less than a mile from their hiking spot in Delphi, Indiana. Their throats had been slit, Libby was found unclothed, and Abby's jacket was laying over her. A crime like this was completely unheard of in the small town of Delphi, Indiana, and when I say small, I mean tiny. The town's population was only 3,000 in 2017. I mean, my high school had more kids than that. It's so small. After the bodies were found, investigative teams were called because the town's police unit was not experienced for something like this. Investigators discovered that Libby had recorded an audio clip as they approached, capturing their, giving them directions that said, quote, "down the hill." And police decided to release the last images that were on Libby's phone and the audio clips from that day. The evidence was so haunting and this case was so wild that it was immediately being reported on across the country. Despite thousands of tips and a $200,000 reward, the case went cold for years. In July of 2017, just 5 months after the girls' bodies had been found, police released a sketch based on that chilling footage caught on Libby's phone. And just 2 years later, in April of 2019, an updated sketch went out, with new details that kept some hope alive that this case could be solved. Investigators say that they uncovered a fake Snapchat account with the username of Anthony_shots, which Libby may have communicated with shortly before her unaliving. Finally, a breakthrough came in October of 2022, when Richard Matthew Allen, a 52-year-old Delphi resident, was arrested after a volunteer noticed that he had self-reported being near the trail 3 days after the unalivings. A tip that had come years before, but had been mislabeled, so it was overlooked originally. So 2 years later, in October of 2024, Allen's trial began. Prosecutors presented the 43-second video where you can see a man with a hat and a jacket trailing behind the girls on their hike, with the audio of him saying, quote, "down the hill," and a recovered linking Allen's registered weapon to the crime scene. After 4 days of deliberation, in November of 2024, Allen was found guilty for the unaliving of both Abby and Libby. The judge gave Allen a sentence of 130 years in prison, which was 65 years for each girl. But even with the conviction, the families say that the pain still remains. Libby's grandfather said there's, quote, "no celebration, just relief that he can never hurt anyone again," end quote. Their little town of Delphi, Indiana marks the girls' memory with orange porch lights, memory stones, and a park in their honor. Thankfully, these girls were aware enough to catch their on tape. They captured the evidence while they still could, which is what led to the arrest. Their final act helped identify and convict even though it was 7 years later. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to Abby and Libby's stories. I would love to talk to you guys about this case in the comments. I want to hear everything that you have to say about it. I post true crime videos, so if you like that kind of content, make sure you follow so you don't miss my next video. And please, 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 please stay safe out there. You never know what's right around the corner.
I have another creepy story about Epping Forest. This woman has DM'd me about a time when she bought her boyfriend foraging lessons in Epping Forest. So one day she's Googling present ideas and this one guy's name keeps coming up and he does these little workshops all over the UK and she just happens to see that there's one taking place around his birthday in Epping Forest, so she thinks perfect and she books it for her boyfriend. On the day her boyfriend gets there and straight away it's like weird. He thought it was going to be like a big old group of them like he saw in the pictures, but actually when he arrives it's just this one guy who looks kind of young and then two other people eventually arrive. And when he's chatting to this guy beforehand, that he seemed kind of nervous. The entire time that they're there is like a whistling noise, and at one point one of the other guys on the course says like, what is that whistling noise? Like, what kind of animal is making that sound? And the guy very nervously says, I'm actually not sure. I was hearing it a lot when I was setting up before you guys arrived, and I just can't pinpoint what it is. In fact, I've recorded it and I've sent it to a few of my friends. At this point, the noise is so loud that you can't really ignore it and it sounds just like a human whistling. But then around lunchtime, when all of the guys are getting to know each other a bit more and they're on like more casual terms, conversation gets turned back to the whistling noise, which again is still going intermittently. It's not relentless, it's not constant, but it's there and it sounds purposeful. Almost like somebody or something is trying to get the men's attention. The woman's boyfriend asks, so what did your friends say? You know, your WhatsApp group that you were talking about, all the forestry people. What did they say about the noise? What did they think it was? He looks at his phone and kind of jokingly says, oh, they're just talking nonsense. And he says, go on, tell us. And the guy proceeds to tell that all of his friends on the WhatsApp group, when they hear this noise, are telling him it's a skinwalker. And then he goes on to tell them exactly what a skinwalker is and how it's a myth, it's not real, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes on to tell them that his granddad, the guy that actually founded these groups, who's no longer with them, had told him about skinwalkers and whistling in the forest when he was just a child. And how no matter what he did, he must never answer to the whistle, follow it, or whistle back. So being a little bit of a joker, her boyfriend starts to whistle back and ask it to come and show itself. One guy that runs the group, he looks noticeably uncomfortable. He starts to pack away the lunch stuff, grab the equipment and move on to the next location. There was like a noticeable shift in the energy of the whole group. The activities are over, the guys go to the car park and they say their goodbyes. Her boyfriend gets into his car and guess what? The car will not start. Not only will it not start, it also will not let him into the car. And when he does manage to get into the car, the alarm goes off and he can't get it to stop. And so rather than sit in the car with the alarm blaring, he gets back out of the car, locks the car again to make the alarm stop and has to wait outside. Each guy on the group takes it in turns to look at the car, but they cannot find anything wrong with it. It was almost like the electrics in the car had malfunctioned. At around an hour after the class had actually been finished, all of these guys are still standing around trying to fix this guy's car, but nothing is working. And so one by one, they all start to make their excuses and leave. That is apart from the young guy that's running the class. He stays with him until the whistling noise starts again. And at that point, the guy tells him to get in the car and come with him. He's like, no, don't worry, you're in completely the opposite direction. He would be going 45 minutes out of his way just to drop this guy home, but he was willing to do that. He calls his girlfriend and she's around a 45-minute journey away from him. And so she gets straight in the car and starts to drive to him. By the time she gets to him, it is pitch black. He's had to stand outside the car for that entire time because if he gets in the car, the alarm starts again and it's unbearable. The girlfriend arrives, they both sit in her car while they await the AA. He tells his girlfriend about the whistling and she starts to hear it too. And they look out to the forest towards where the whistling is coming from. They start to see shadows moving between the trees. But these shadows, although they look like human figures, are moving way too fast to be human. Almost like they were dancing in and out of the tree line right in front of them, clear as day. Although these shadows didn't have a face, it was very clear that as they moved their body, they were looking into the car. They start to hear a scratching from underneath the car. They can almost feel their feet vibrate as it gets scratched. They get so freaked out that they leave the car. They tell the AA, don't worry, and they go home. Next morning, the guy that runs the classes texts the boyfriend, asks him if everything is okay, and the boyfriend proceeds to tell him all the weird stuff that had happened. Not only does he tell him about the shadows, he also says that he and his girlfriend have had some really horrible dreams that night, and he's expecting this poor guy to turn around and say, yeah, I think you're not sound of mind, but he doesn't. Guess what he does? He texts back a huge long ritual for him to do, which includes a prayer. He says, that's what my granddad used to tell me to do if this ever happened. And that is how he gave up foraging, which is a shame, but I can definitely see why he did.
Because crossing the border isn't scary enough, imagine running into La Llorona. Yeah, so I'm from the Valley, which is so South Texas that if you keep going straight on the highway, you will end up in Mexico. More specifically in Matamoros, which is a border town to Brownsville, Texas. And I'm a nosy bitch and decided to look up scary stories from Matamoros, and well, do I have regrets? Yes. Am I gonna share them with you? Also yes. And yes, these are Pop-Tarts. This one has a little bite taken out of it, so cute. So this guy's actually from Guatemala, but he traveled to Matamoros because he was planning to cross over to the United States. Obviously, this is a very scary thing for him. He knew the risks and he's heard terrifying stories about crossing the border. He's heard about people drowning, about people just disappearing and never being heard from again. So obviously this was a very big risk. So him and a couple of other people got in contact with a coyote who said he had a safe route on how to get to the other side, so they paid him. They had been walking for a very, very long time. He said that the current looked really strong, but he was a good swimmer, so he knew that he was going to be able to make it across, or at least that's what he thought. As soon as all of them got into that river, they all heard this strange sound that didn't sound human. In the beginning, he ignored that sound because he thought to himself, I'm just nervous, I'm hearing things, maybe it's the wind. But then that sound happened again. This time he paid attention and he said that it sounded like somebody was crying, like really sad, and it was coming from the US side of the river. He said that the second time they all heard it again, they all looked at each other and they could tell that they were all very scared, but they decided to just go on and try to cross the river, just not worry about what that sound was. As he's walking in the river, he said that the water got to like his chest, and that is when he saw her. On the US side of the river was a lady who looked like she was hovering over the ground and that the wind was moving her dress from side to side. Her dress was all white. When he looks at her face, he said that this lady was just looking right back at them, but she wasn't talking, she wasn't screaming, she wasn't doing anything but looking at them. He wanted to scream to warn the other guys that the lady was standing right there, but that's when the coyote was telling them to hurry up, so he couldn't warn them about the lady. In that moment, when he had seen the lady, he was about to tell the guys about her. The coyote was rushing them. He didn't get a chance to. He suddenly feels something pull him underneath the river. He didn't understand how he was underneath the water, how someone had pulled him, because it wasn't that deep. He was standing there, and once he was underneath the water, he opened his eyes and he could see a white dress next to him. He could see how this lady in that white dress had her arms extended, holding on to his legs. He could see her face, but there was no actual like facial features, that her eyes just looked like they were empty holes. When he saw her, he said he screamed so loud underneath the water that obviously he swallowed some of that water, and in that moment he just knew that he had to fight. He kicked, he punched, he tried to get away, but nothing was working. He can feel how this thing was pulling him more and more underneath that water. When he finally managed to get away and go all the way on top of the water, he went out there just trying to breathe desperately, but he saw her standing right next to him, right there, right in front of him. She started crying, and he said that he felt like her cries were moving that water so intensely. He tried to swim to the edge of the river, but he felt as if something was holding him right there. He knew that it wasn't the river or something inside of that river doing that to him, that it was her. At that point, he was shaking, he was cold, he felt like he couldn't breathe anymore, and he thought to himself, like, this is where I'm going to die. Then all of a sudden, like a stronger kind of current came, and he felt that thing had let him go, and he swam all the way to the edge. With the last energy that he had, he held held onto a branch on the side of that river. The people who had been there with them finally saw him and helped him off and out of that river. When he finally looked at them, they were all pale and asking him like, what happened? What happened to you? Where were you? At that point, he couldn't talk. Like, he didn't have the energy. All he could do was look back at that river and see if that lady was gonna come after him. He never saw her again. When he finally made it to where he had family and friends, there was this old guy that he knew, and he told him what had happened, because at that point he hadn't told anybody. After this older man listened to his story, he looked at him very seriously and said, yeah, La Llorona has been appearing in that river for a very long time. Sometimes she takes the people who she confuses with her children. If she touched you and you're alive, it's because she let you live. He explains that ever since then, if he goes near like a body of water or a river, that's all he could think of. That's all the memories that he will forever have when he goes near any river. And sometimes when he goes to sleep, he has nightmares that he's back there again, and he almost feels as if she's out here looking for him. I have chills just thinking about how close that Rio Bravo is to us. Like, who would have known? La Llorona, literally in our backyards. Thankfully, never seen her, never want to see her. But that shit is definitely scary, because imagine already taking that risk and not thinking that something paranormal is gonna happen to you. Like, what the fuck? But what do you guys think?
Whomever coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
We're in the courtroom now, okay? The 6-week trial that turned into something way bigger than anyone could have seen coming. Hi, this is future me editing this video. I had to cut the video into 2 parts because the first video was just too long. So this is part 2. If you haven't watched part 1, go watch it now. Okay, proceed. Love you, bye. And again, I sound like a broken record, but the prosecution is fighting to prove that Karen Reed was and is the only person responsible for ending John's life. And Karen Reed's team is fighting to prove that she is being framed. One of the biggest things the prosecution held on to was Karen Reed telling multiple people in regards to John, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. They are saying that she basically confessed. I mean, call it what it is. If they're saying that she said those words, they are saying that she flat out confessed. However, nobody, not the paramedics on the scene, no witnesses, not the police, not a single person wrote or stated that Karen Reed said that in their reports from that night. And they're holding on to it so hard as if that was arguably one of the most important parts of this case, yet every single person just failed to write that in their reports. Karen says that she may have said something along those lines, but more so phrased in a could I have hit him, more so as a question. Next, the infamous broken taillight on Karen Reed's black SUV. Karen is unsure of how she broke her taillight. But of course, the prosecution says it's obvious. She hit John with her car as she was turning around, as the evidence showed her car reversing at 24 miles an hour. They say she must have hit him then when she turned around and left the Albert's house around 12:45 in the morning. Because pieces of Karen's broken taillight were found in the snow at the scene of the crime, that is a fact. And John's DNA was found on the taillight pieces, and the prosecution uses the angry voicemail that Karen left John that night after she drove off to prove that their relationship was a bad one, a toxic one, and hint at the fact that Karen was angry with John that night as what they say was her motive for ending his life. And the voicemails are nasty. When Karen drove off, she left John voicemails yelling at him, calling him a loser, telling him to go f himself, telling her that she him, etc., etc. Fine, they have a strong argument with those voicemails proving how angry she was at John that night. But the defense also has a big argument. They believe that that evidence, the pieces of the broken taillight, were planted. And they have a few things that could back that up and make Michael Proctor look suspicious, or at the very least show horrible police work. First of all, there's video footage of Karen leaving John's house at 5:07 in the morning when she was going to go meet Jen and Carrie to go look for John. And it looks like she could have bumped John's car with her car on the side of the broken taillight, so she could have broken her taillight then, which they could use to try and make their case, but for some reason, all and any footage that would have captured Karen's black SUV on the side of the broken taillight, any cameras with footage that could prove that her taillight was not broken when she left John and got back to his house alone, all that footage is missing, including camera footage from a public library. The footage is just missing, gone, can't be found. Why? I wonder the same thing. Then, when the crime scene was being processed after John's body was found, those pieces of taillight in the snow are not found for hours. Nothing is found for hours, even though they were literally searching with a leaf blower, blowing the snow out of the way. And then suddenly, after Karen's car was taken in as evidence, over 40 pieces of broken taillight are found. The defense is saying, look, Michael Proctor needed to wait to get his hands on Karen's car car so he could grab pieces from her taillight, and in a small gap of time when the crime scene was left unattended, he could have someone drop them off and plant them as evidence. Prosecution says that's stupid. Of course we didn't do that. Here is a video showing when we were processing Karen's SUV, nobody even touched that side of the car. They're playing the video in court. The defense says, hold on, that is backwards. That video is literally inverted, so when you turn it back around, there is someone touching the area of the broken taillight, and the hat of the person that seems to be back there doing whatever is none other than Michael Proctor's hat. And on the topic of bad police work in this investigation, when collecting evidence at the scene of the crime, they didn't have evidence bags, I guess, or whatever they needed to collect evidence properly. So you know what they used to collect blood? Blood they found as evidence. They collected the blood and put it in red Solo cups. They put those red Solo cups in a brown grocery bag. Shocking. Moving on, back to the prosecution saying Karen and John's relationship was rocky and not good. Turns out 30 messages come out between Karen Reed and Brian Higgins. Brian Higgins, who I briefly mentioned before, is a federal agent who was at the Albert's house the night of the crime. To make a long story short, Brian Higgins and Karen Reed, while she was in a relationship with John, were messaging each other, being very flirty, and they even shared a kiss not too long ago. The prosecution says John and Karen's relationship was bad, not good. She was interested in someone else. She does not care about John O'Keefe. The defense says, not so fast. How about we consider the possibility that John O'Keefe found out that his girlfriend Karen Reed was flirting with Brian Higgins, and that night he entered the Albert's house where Brian Higgins was, went up to him to confront him. A fight broke out, someone took it too far, knocked John out, and when he became unresponsive, everyone inside that house decided to put him out on the front yard, let him pass away from hypothermia, and frame it all on Karen. Now, more evidence to support the idea the defense presented or a similar situation of a fight breaking out. Brian and Nicole, the owners of 34 Fairview Road, had a German Shepherd, a dog named Chloe. Soon after John's death, the family got rid of the dog. Chloe the dog, it ran away, they gave her away, I don't know. But Chloe the dog had a history of being aggressive and violent. The defense has an expert witness testify and say John's injuries on his arms are likely to be teeth or claw marks, showing that John had likely been attacked by an animal, aka a large dog. Even though the prosecution had their own expert witness come up and say that those injuries could be scratches from the broken taillight, a lot of people believe the injuries do look way more like scratches or teeth marks from a dog. The prosecution says, well, they tested the injuries on John for dog DNA and there was none found, so he was not attacked by a dog. And the defense says, well, no, they didn't find dog DNA, but they did find pig DNA, which could be from a dog treat, which could have been left on John from Chloe the dog's teeth. The Alberts also sold their house after the crime, and they said that they had been planning on selling it for a while, even before John's passing. Regardless, you could look at that as being suspicious, so the defense uses that to support their argument that something happened inside that house. A strong belief by a lot of people is that there was a fight that broke out in the house between John O'Keefe, maybe Brian Higgins, or somebody else. They were fighting, the dog saw it, got aggressive, jumped on John, and attacked him further. They left him out in the cold to pass away, and then the Alberts got rid of the dog, rid of the house, no dog, no house, no evidence. The prosecution says, look, this guy, John O'Keefe, he was one of us, a Boston cop in a house full of Boston cops. How dumb do you think we would be to put a deceased body out in our front yard, knowing that we would be responsible for the death and tangled in the case? Which is also a good point. However, let's get into the 1.5 million accidental butt dials that happened that night. Well, we'll just mention some of them. Okay, so back to the night of the crime. By 2 a.m., everyone had left the Alberts house. Everyone went to bed, or so we thought. Brian Higgins didn't go home to bed. He went to the Canton Police Department, which is the police department handling this case. He went there around 1:30 a.m. He had no business being there after a long night out, but he went to apparently fill out some paperwork quickly or do something random, and then apparently he went home to bed. So by 2 a.m., everyone claimed to be asleep. But phone records show that at 2:22 a.m. on January 29th, Brian Albert called Brian Higgins. Seconds later, Brian Higgins calls Brian Albert back, and that call is answered. It only lasts a few seconds, but it is answered. Both men under oath say, I don't know, wasn't me, I was sleeping. Then we find out that Brian Albert destroys his phone, gets rid of his phone a day before he received a protective order to hand in his phone. Then months later, Brian Higgins drives to a military base, I'm pretty sure hours away, completely destroys his phone and his SIM card, disposes of the pieces of them in separate areas in the military base that investigators do not have access to. And the defense says, look, they obviously have something to hide. Shall I mention other weird phone activity? Jen McCabe, at 2:25 a.m., she sends 2 texts text messages. What they were, we don't know. She also deletes a bunch of calls that she made the night of the crime. Weird as well. That leads us to another battle of the experts, the infamous how long to die in the cold at 2:27 a.m. again when everyone is suspected to be asleep. During this time, according to the prosecution's argument, John's body is already outside in the snow all alone, but nobody knows yet. Only Karen. Everyone else is asleep. Jen's phone records show that at 2:27 a.m. she made a Google search, how long to die in the cold. How would she know to search that if she isn't supposed to know that her friend is out in the snow yet she doesn't find out for hours? Well, the defense says that search was made at 2:27 a.m. and then it was deleted. It's literally in black and white. It's right there. There's no question about it. Jen on the stand says, no, wasn't me. I didn't make that search. Which, I mean, she looks pretty silly saying that when the phone records literally show that it was. But the prosecution comes with a different expert saying, well, it might be wrong because it says 2:27 a.m., but that isn't when the search was made. The search was made when they found John with Karen and Carrie, and Karen was yelling at Jen to look up how long it takes for someone to pass away in the cold or pass away from hypothermia, whatever. That's why she made that search in the morning, which she did, and other records show that at that time in the morning, she did do that. She did search that when John's body was found. With the prosecution experts say that it shows 2:27 a.m. because that's the time that Jen opened the tab, not the time she made the search, but the time that she opened the tab. So maybe both are right. They're just seeing it differently. I don't know. Battle of the experts. One more thing I want to mention, Lucky, the snowplow driver. Lucky lived in the area for a long time. He knows the Alberts household. He's known they lived there for a long time. Lucky was on shift that night. He drove with his snowplow right by the Alberts house between 2:30 and 2:45 in the morning. Lucky testified that the seat on his snowplow is higher than most, so he can see 5 to 15 feet out in front of him, and he testified with 100% certainty that when he drove past the Alberts house that night, there was nobody on the front lawn. Lucky says, no way, there was nothing. I saw it. I didn't see John. He wasn't out there. The defense makes a point to say, well, if the prosecution is correct and Karen hit John with her car and left him there at 12:45 a.m., wouldn't Lucky have seen him? And the prosecution says, no, Lucky must have missed him. Okay, and there's literally so much more, but that's what I felt was important to know. Well, after the 6 weeks of this trial that was keeping everyone on the edge of their seat, the trial was declared a mistrial. And the jury was able to find Karen Reed not guilty on 2 out of the 3 charges, but because they couldn't agree unanimously on all 3 charges, the judge declared a mistrial, meaning all of this has to happen again. This whole trial will happen again, and John's poor family will have to sit through an entire second trial. His mom. I cannot believe that this was the ending that everyone was waiting for. The second trial is currently happening. It started with jury selection underway. I have no idea what we can expect from the second trial, but let me know your thoughts. Also wanted to mention there's a great documentary out. I watched it on HBO, but I think it's other places as well. It's called A Body in the Snow, Karen Reed's Trial. You should see it. Does a great job of explaining all the evidence and goes more into detail. I also was briefly listening to the Crime Junkies episode they just put out on this case, which great watch again. They go really into detail about all the evidence, etc. So a good source to get information about this case as well. But don't know how long this video is going to be. I feel like I've been recording for like 2 hours. Anyway, that is all I have for today's video. Please let me know your thoughts on this. And also remember that somebody lost their lives. He is a family. He was a son, a brother, a very loved guy, and he will be very missed. So be respectful in the comments. Remember that this is a real case. These are real people. And yeah, I love you guys very, very much. I hope you're having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy. And I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you. Mwah.
This story is also coming from Matamoros. Like I said, I got a little bit curious and started looking up stories from Matamoros, which borders Brownsville, Texas, and I found so many good ones, but this is one that I just want to share so bad. This is the type of story where like I wish I can make short films just to watch this play out. So this man's name is Rogelio and he lives in Matamoros, and what he's about to tell us happened in 2013. He explains that even though it's been over a decade since this has happened to him, every time he thinks about it, sends chills down his spine. I forgot, there's skeleton hands holding onto a jewel. There are $5 at Walmart in the Halloween section. So Rogelio works at a cemetery and he had his fair share of weird things happening that made him question reality or like seeing just strange things there. Sometimes in order to make some extra cash, he will paint gravestones, or if people are there visiting their loved ones, he'll go up to them and ask if they need anything. So there was one time where his wife was really sick and he didn't have enough money to get all the medicine that she needed. needed. He was really desperate, and he just so happened to see this lady who went to visit her dad's grave, so he went up to her and asked her if she needed anything, but unfortunately she said no. That moment he was very desperate, like I said, and he had to tell the lady. He was like, look, my wife is really sick, I don't have enough money to buy all of her medicine, can I please just do something? Whatever you want to give me is fine. And the lady's like, oh, okay, yeah, you can go ahead and clean my dad's gravestone and I'll pay you. After he finished cleaning her dad's gravestone, he said that he was joking around with her, and he's like, look, I showered your dad really well, and she started giggling along with him. She ends up giving him the equivalent of $200 US and tells him, here, so you can get your wife the medicine or anything else that she needs, and obviously he was very grateful to her. He then says that this lady told him something that he had never heard before. She tells him, whenever you're in need of money, go to a deceased person's grave, light up a candle, and ask them for it. She then gives him some extra money and asks him if he can put a candle on her dad's gravestone tomorrow, and obviously he agrees. He actually listened to what this lady told him, because over time, anytime he needed money, he would get a candle, go to a deceased person's grave, and he would ask for money. And he wanted to do it in a very respectful way, so he would actually tell the gravestone, like the deceased person, hey, this is why I need the money. Like, he wasn't doing it recklessly, he just really needed the money in the moment. He said that it worked, and he was actually doing really well, so over time he stopped doing it altogether because he didn't need to anymore. So years have passed and his kids grew up. One of them is 4 and the other one is 7, and they're ready to go back to school. So he ends up taking them to the store, getting them backpacks, shoes, and the uniforms that are needed, but that left him without any money. Even though he bought them the shoes, the backpack, the outfits, they still needed school supplies, and he was left with nothing after that. He also said that he's been at the cemetery waiting for people to come to see if he can offer some services and get some tips so that he can get those school supplies for his kids. Unfortunately, no one was coming, or nobody really needed him, so he wasn't able to make that money. By this point, it was Friday. He wasn't able to get that money, but then he remembered the lady, the one that told him what he should do years ago and go place a candle. So that's exactly what he did. He went to get a candle and he actually put it on the lady's father's gravestone, and he did tell him, like, look, I really need the money, I really want to buy my kids school supplies, can you please help me? He waited impatiently for someone to come to the cemetery and hoping that they needed him so that he can get a tip, but it was noon, and then it was 3 o'clock, and then it was 4, and nobody had come to the cemetery. He gave up and he just thought to himself, like, man, that candle trick didn't work today, and I'm not sure how I'm gonna get that money for the school supplies. It was around 5:40 and he had to close down the cemetery at 6, so that's what he was gonna go do. He was walking towards the gates, but that's also when he heard a sound. It's actually a guy. He said the guy looks really nice. He had jeans on, he had like a square style shirt, and he went up to him right away and he asked if he could help him do anything, and the guy said yes. He's like, here, grab this. It was like 4 packs of beer and chips and just like random stuff. He said that they walked to this big mausoleum. The guy took out a key and opened the door to the mausoleum, and he helped put all of the beer and, you know, the chips and everything inside. Once he was done, he asked him, hey boss, do you need anything else? Maybe I can go get you some water. Is there anything that you need? And the guy tells him no, but he's taking his wallet out and gives him a $50 bill. When he sees the 50, he looks at him and he's like, hey, I don't have change for this. And the guy's like, oh no, that's for you, go ahead and keep it. So obviously he leaves. He's so happy. He's thanking God and he's apologizing to that lady's, you know, deceased father, saying, I'm so sorry I didn't believe in you, thank you for coming through. And obviously he went home so happy that he was able to get those school supplies for his kids. However, the following day, really early in the morning, he gets a phone call from his boss asking him to meet him inside of the cemetery. When he gets there, he notices that the boss is at the same mausoleum that guy he had helped the night before was at, and there was a few other people there with him. Am I saying mausoleum right? You know what I'm talking about. If I'm not saying it right, you know what I mean. When he gets to where they are, he says that the boss looked at him and said, did you or anybody else drink beer at this mausoleum yesterday or last night? And he was like, oh no, it was that guy that came. He came like right before closing, and I did help him put the beer in there, but I didn't drink beer. I left and he stayed here. He obviously started describing the guy physically and what he was driving and everything like that. As he's describing the guy to him, because he's like, I did not drink beer, he notices that one of the ladies just sits down. Like, it almost looked like she couldn't hold herself up anymore and she just sat. And then another lady just started crying. He didn't understand what was happening, but obviously he needed his job, so he's like, I don't know what happened, but I promise you I didn't drink beer, I didn't make this mess, because there was like beer and like chips everywhere in that Mausoleum. He even explains to them like, he gave me money, he gave me a tip when I helped put this stuff in there, and I was happy because I needed that money for my kids for their school supplies. And they all start crying and he's like, what the is going on? Like, what is going on? So finally a girl came up to him, had her phone and had a picture, and shows the picture to him and says, was it this guy? He was like, yeah, that's the guy. Call him so that he could tell you that I just helped him, I didn't drink the beer. Call him, he will tell you that he was the one that stayed here. The girl who had just showed him that picture on the phone explains to him that that's her brother, but it's been 2 years that he has been passed and that Mausoleum was his. They were all actually there that day because it was his birthday and they were just gonna come bring him flowers and beer and stuff like that. In that moment, he felt like his legs were about to give up because he's like, no, I saw him. Like, I saw him. He was here. He gave me money. Like, what do you mean he's been deceased? He did end up cleaning that mausoleum for them, but he just couldn't stop thinking about it because he swears that guy was there. Like, he gave him money. He, you know what? Like, this is impossible. He believes that God gave that guy permission to celebrate his birthday however he wanted, and that maybe he heard his, you know, desperate cries and how he needed that money, and he was able to make that happen for him. I don't find this story scary. I find it very sweet, but like, what are your thoughts? I want to hear what you guys think about it, because this sounds so sweet to me. Like, it's a little scary, yeah, but also like the way that maybe these different deceased people came together to make it happen for him because he really needed it for his family, for his kids, is crazy. I want to cry right now. Oh my god, okay, I gotta go. Mausoleum. It was mausoleum the whole fucking time. I kept saying Mausoleum. Bro, this video took me like 15 minutes to record. If you hear me say, what was I saying? Mausoleum. Oh my god, what is it? It's mausoleum, you stupid bitch. If you hear me say mausoleum, just know that in my heart I meant mausoleum. Okay, thank you. Just know that I'm translating this from Spanish to English, so Google is free. I have no excuse. Okay, I'm sorry. Bye.